Hello and welcome to another reading vlog. So this one will possibly contain spoilers. Actually, there's no possible about it. It will. I don't usually tend to have spoilers in my reading vlogs. Well, I haven't before. But this time I am going to be figuring out whodunit in a murder mystery. So obviously I'm going to be discussing it as the reading vlog goes on. And I am going to be reading an Agatha Christie and trying to solve it. We'll see how that goes. So this is probably one of her lesser known works. Like, this book isn't probably very well known out there. She's obviously got some books that are very well known and very popular, and this, I haven't actually heard about this before prior to this. So I'm basically reading through all of the Agatha Christie books. So I thought, I've seen it done on BookTube a few times now. Why don't I do it myself? Because I am reading through all of the Agatha Christie books. Why don't I try and solve it and do a vlog about it? So that's what this is all about. This is the start of it. It's going to be like a series. This one is a 3-act tragedy. And like I said, one of the lesser known ones. This is basically following Sir Charles Cartwright, who's a distinguished actor, and he is hosting a party. So he has all of his friends, the family, and everybody, all the party guests are milling around, they're drinking and chatting. And then we have the Reverend Stephen Babington, and he's basically sipping his cocktail, and then he clutches his throat, he sways, and he drops down dead. That is our victim. We're obviously going to be solving who did it. It's a locked room mystery because it could be any one of the guests at the party. So I think it's going to be fun. And then it says, the beginning of the drama, there was to be a death in every act in the 3-act tragedy. So maybe there's going to be 3 deaths. I don't know. That's the vibes that I'm getting from this. There's probably going to be a bit of hysteria because everyone in the party is obviously going to be aware there's a murderer amongst them. It's going to be some drama going on. I think we're in for a good time. And I'm looking forward to this reading vlog as well because I think it's going to probably last 2 or 3 days. I mean, there's only 220 pages in the book, so probably 2 days. But I am working from the office tomorrow, so we'll see. Maybe 2, maybe 3, we don't know yet. But I'm excited to get into this and start solving whodunit and take you along for the ride. And we'll be discussing each time I come up with this, revelation, this idea of who I think has done it. I'm going to have a notebook and a pen with me at all times. There's going to be a lot of writing and note-taking, and I want to try and figure this out before Agatha Christie does the big reveal with Poirot. So that's the plan. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get on with it, and welcome to another reading vlog. Okay, so I'm 3 chapters in to 3-act tragedy. So the opening is the guests arriving. The first chapter is the guests arriving at this house. So we learn a bit about Charles, who is the actor. He's the host of the party. He always has to be the centre of attention. So he's now retired and wanted like this quiet life, but he's living in this very over-the-top bungalow overlooking the sea, and is kind of like picked out by Mr. Satterthwaite, whose point of view we're kind of seeing the story from. So he's still Charles is still very much wanting to be the centre of attention and is still forever acting out, even as he's hosting at this party. So we kind of learn who the guests are going to be. So we have Dr. Sir Bartholomew, Dr. Bartholomew, who's now a Sir, he got knighthood. He's mentioned quite early on because he's kind of like having a conversation with Mr. Satterthwaite. We then hear of Miss Lytton Gore, who's possibly seeing Charles. She was out on the ship with him. Maybe there's a little romance there, I don't know. There's her mother, who is Lady Mary. We have Angela Sutcliffe, who was once a well-known actress and now she's like described as no longer young. We have the Dacres. So Mrs. Dacres used to own a dressmaking establishment, and then her husband is Captain Dacres. And we learned that he spent a lot of time at the horse racing, and there were like rumours about that time. And we've got Anthony Astor, who is a playwright, actually known as Miss Wills, and I think she basically uses a male name to basically get her playwright scripts out there, which is what they used to do back in the day. Then we have the Babingtons. We've got the parson, so Reverend Babington, and his wife, Mrs. Babington. And then we've got an Oliver Manders, who is a journalist, and then we also learned that Poirot is going to be at the dinner as well. And then we go into chapter 2, and that's when they're all kind of milling around and they're talking, and we learn that Mr. Satterthwaite is someone who just likes to be on the outside looking in and basically getting a feel of everyone at the party. He kind of observes everyone, and he basically he's like an onlooker. It kind of makes you think, maybe did he see something? Maybe he doesn't want to say, because he's very much looking at everyone in the party. We see a bit about Mrs. Dacres. So she's very well put together. She's very much all about her appearance. Doesn't like anything of her appearance out of place. And then we learn that Sir Charles is the one that is mixing the cocktails. And whilst he's mixing the cocktails, he stood there talking with Angela. So obviously Angela is the woman who used to be a well-known actress. We basically see that Oliver Manders is speaking with Miss Gore, and he's described as 25, very handsome. So they're obviously over there talking, and we then have Reverend Babington is stood there with Mr. Satterthwaite and Lady Mary, and they're basically discussing, and then they have the parlour maid approach them with a tray of drinks. So they each pick a drink. They make a joke about how, you know, Reverend Babington goes, oh, I'm sure my wife will allow me to have one drink. And then very quickly we see, well, first of all, we see Lady Mary point out over to Miss Wills and basically be like, oh, who is that? And it's like almost like a distraction, kind of comes across as. So she basically says to Reverend Babington and Mr. Satterthwaite, who she's talking to, oh, look over there, kind of thing. Who's that? And then asks questions about Miss Wills and who is this and all of that, which kind of seems like a distraction to me. And then when he collapses, it is Miss Gore who notices it first and like shouts out, oh, he doesn't look so well. And then he obviously collapses and dies. And then it is Sir Bartholomew, who is the doctor, who is the one that quickly runs over, picks them up, puts them on the couch, tries to sort them out, and then obviously is like, oh no, he's definitely dead. So we've got, you know, Miss Gore obviously being the first to notice there's something wrong. We've got Lady Mary, who's obviously doing some weird distraction, and then mother and daughter. So could be connected, like doing it together, don't know. And then we've got chapter 3. So this is like the aftermath. So we have Lady Mary takes Mrs. Babington home, but everyone else is staying at the venue. And when Mr. Satterthwaite is on his way to bed, he gets pulled into the room with Charles and Sir Bartholomew, and they're basically having a discussion. Now Charles seems to be acting. He's still in character, and he starts doing a limp like a certain character that Mr. Satterthwaite recognises. And it just seems a bit odd that he seems to be acting, and then he's very much like, oh, was it suicide, or did they have a fit or a seizure? And he's very much asking a lot of questions, and obviously it's acting a bit weird. It's a bit weird. And we then got Sir Bartholomew, who's very quick to be like, no, stop being suspicious, stop talking about this, you're going to start rumours and all of this, and is very quick to just shut him down. So that seems a bit odd as well. Also, I don't really understand why everything is from the point of view of Mr. Satterthwaite. I don't know whether it could be like a disguise and it could have actually been him, but we're kind of seeing it differently at the moment. I'm not sure, but so far we have Lady Mary doing this weird distraction thing, and then her daughter being the first, and Miss Gore being the first person to notice it, which seems a bit odd. Anyway, so that's in chapter 2 when it actually happens. And then in chapter 3, when we're having this discussion, we've got Charles basically acting. And I know that he was an actor, but it seems a bit of an odd time to be acting and coming across as really bizarre. But obviously we're only seeing this from Mr. Satterthwaite's point of view, so maybe he's got it wrong, I don't know. And we're also seeing Sir Bartholomew being very quick to get rid of any suspicions at all, as if he basically wants them all to think that this was just him being Reverend Babington being ill. So that seems suspicious as well. So that's the first three chapters. We've seen who dies. Well, we know who dies anyway from the blurb. So we've seen the murder. We know who was with him at the time. We know who was the first to notice that something was wrong. We know who brought out the drinks. We know who was stirring the drinks and making the cocktails. So some good thoughts here. I'm going to carry on reading and see what chapter 4 tells me. Hello. Okay, so we have a reading update. I haven't read as much as I would have liked, but yeah, I had some stuff to do, but I am now a further 3 chapters in, and I have managed to whittle down the list of suspects. So obviously from the last update, we had probably like 15 suspects. It could be any one of them. You had all the guests, you had the host, you had like the maid, parlour maid, and the housekeeper. There was all these people at this event. Something has happened since that has whittled that down by quite a bit, and we'll get to that point in a minute. So first of all, let's have a look at what has actually happened since the last update. So chapter 4 is basically Miss Gore and Mr. Satterthwaite having this conversation outside. And he is basically being asked so many questions by Miss Gore that it's almost like there's an ulterior motive to it. Like she wants him to see her as this innocent person. And she's determined to say that it's murder and that she wants, I don't know, there's something about it which basically is kind of telling me that she's got this ulterior motive to it. It just seems a bit odd, like the line of questioning. And then she takes Mr. Satterthwaite to her mother's for dinner. And then Lady Mary is asking all these questions about Sir Charles, which just seems a bit odd, in my opinion. But we do learn from this chapter how much Miss Gore seems to have this love for Sir Charles, and even though he's so much older than her, it's obvious that she's almost like obsessed with him. And then we go into chapter 5, and at the beginning of this chapter, we have Mr. Satterthwaite sat with Sir Charles, and he describes him as looking old and tired. And then Sir Charles just basically turns around and says, right, I'm selling the house, I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm leaving for good, I don't want anything more to do with this house. And that seems all quite rushed, and it's like, why is he so quick to leave when there's been this murder and people obviously, thinking that this is a murder and not just a seizure this guy has had. And it seems a bit odd that he's so quick to want to go. And then we have like Miss Gore finding out by Mr. Satterthwaite that about Sir Charles leaving, and she is automatically just jealous and saying it's another woman, and you see this like really weird jealous side to her, as if she's like quite capable of doing anything to get what she wants kind of thing. And we learn though that the reason for Sir Charles wanting to leave is because whilst Miss Gore and Oliver Mendez was over there, she kind of wanted to get Sir Charles jealous, thinking that would make him want to be with her more. So was talking with Oliver Mendez, and then when they left and Sir Charles kind of saw them off, they kissed down the pathway, and she was like determined to make sure that Sir Charles saw, in a way of making him jealous. So obviously when Mr. Satterthwaite is basically saying to her, right, he's leaving, and she's getting all angry and saying, is it another woman? It then comes about that actually he's leaving because he doesn't want to deal with the heartbreak, because he does actually really like Miss Gore. And she basically finishes that chapter by saying, I will get him back. And it's basically saying to Mr. Satterthwaite that she would basically do anything to get Sir Charles back, because he's now gone to the south of France, but she wants him back in the UK. And she basically says that she will do anything to get him there. And then we go into Act 2, so it's Chapter 1, and straight away we learn that Mr. Satterthwaite is reading a newspaper and he sees about the death of Sir Bartholomew, who was obviously at the previous party. He was the doctor who basically ran over to help Reverend Babington really quickly. And he's now dead. He's been killed in the exact same way, by poisoning in a drink that he was drinking at a house party he was holding. So that's one suspect off the list, because he's now also dead. And we then have to figure out who was at the two parties. And we have basically find out that Mr. Satterthwaite is actually over there visiting Sir Charles in France. And we learn that Miss Gore has sent a letter to Sir Charles, basically saying to him that she wants him to come back to help figure out what's happened, because it's obvious that both of them were murdered. She's saying all this sort of thing, and you're kind of seeing how desperate she is for him to return. Almost like, has she done this to get him to come back? Is my thoughts going on here. So she was at the party where Sir Bartholomew was. She mentions about a man being there that kind of makes it look a bit suspicious. And at first you see Sir Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite talking between themselves, basically saying, oh, maybe she's talking about Oliver Mendez. And when we look at the list of guests, because that got featured in an article or something like that, you see the guests. We have Lord and Lady Eden, Sir Jocelyn and Lady Campbell. So those we know definitely couldn't be, because they weren't at the previous party. But then you've got Lady Mary and Miss Gore. But you've also got Miss Angela Sutcliffe, and she was obviously the one who was stood with Sir Charles when he was making the cocktails at the first party. And also Captain and Mrs. Dacres, is that how you say their name? Dacres? I don't know how you say their name. And obviously we know from the letter that Miss Gore was saying about a man. So obviously the only man that was at both parties is Captain Dacres. But then this could be her, you know, trying to point the blame to him and showing the suspicion to him because of something that she's done. But then I think, when I think about it, I think it's probably too obvious of her being the killer. I don't think Agatha Christie would be that, you know, I don't think I would solve it that quick. So maybe she is telling the truth. Maybe there is something about this Captain Dacres that's been at both parties where two people have now died. That's the way I'm going with it. But obviously we do have Angela Sutcliffe, who's been at both parties, and she was stood next to Sir Charles whilst he was making the cocktails, so she had the chance to slip something in there. So this is where I'm going with it. So we've got Lady Mary and Miss Gore as suspects, possibly doing something together. Because obviously Lady Mary was the one that distracted in the last party. We've got Captain and Mrs. Dacres. I don't really know what their motives would be for it though. And then we've got Angela Sutcliffe. You know, she's now described as no longer young. She's an ex-actress. Maybe there's some, you know, jealousy on that part that she's no longer an actress or something, possibly. I don't know. So those are our suspects that we've got there. So what's that? That's that five suspects I've whittled it down to. So we're getting there. So I'm going to carry on reading, see what the next bit reveals to me. Hello, so coming on here with an update. It's the same day. If you're wondering why I've got a different top on, it's, you know, still the same day. I had to change because I ended up going out for dinner with my mum, and we took my sister's dog Freddie with us. It was a very nice meal, just like chicken, not a healthy meal in the slightest, but yeah, just what it is. And I was going to do an update on my latest thoughts about 5 o'clock-ish. Like plenty of time before I finished work at 6, and I ended up having to do some bits for work, so I couldn't do an update. But it's now, I don't know what time it is, about 9 o'clock-ish. No, probably about 8:30, I think. And I thought I would give my next updates on this. So, wonder where we... I've got my notebook, you see. Oh yeah, here we go. Right, so we were on Act 2, Chapter 2. That was it. So with this one, we learned that obviously, you know, like Sir Bartholomew has been now killed at his own house party, and I was trying to connect who was at which party. So I thought I'd narrowed down the suspects. Just wait for this. Okay, so first of all, we have a new character, and that is Colonel Johnson, and he's the Chief Constable. I do apologise for my hair, by the way. I've just taken it down out of his clip and it's all over the place. Anyway, he suspects the butler because the butler got questioned, and so the butler's John Ellis, a new character, completely new character, wasn't at the previous party, and he gets questioned, and then he basically just does a run-out, and that's it. He's gone. I don't know where. He's just done a runner. And so obviously the Chief Constable is suspecting this butler. Now, personally, I'm like, no, because he wasn't at the previous party. So I'm kind of wondering whether it's either a pretend name or it's a false reference, because he apparently had a reference from a previous employer. And I'm like, so is it a false, like a forged reference or a false name that they've given? Or is it a case of someone dressing up as this butler, but it's obviously someone that was also at the party, that kind of thing. So this is what I was kind of thinking about. And we already knew that Angela Sutcliffe was at the second party as well, and she makes this suggestion that maybe the butler left by the secret passageway. And I kind of felt it was a bit odd that she's kind of leading this Chief Constable down the route of this butler being the suspect, and that he could easily get away via the secret passageway that's in Sir Bartholomew's house. So I kind of thought that was a bit odd. Like, why is she, you know, getting them to follow that line of inquiry so much? And we also know the glasses that everyone had drank from was brought out by one of the maids and the butler, and yet the glasses were checked and they were cleared of any trace. There was no trace of this kind of poison in it. And they've also had the same chef for 15 years, so they're like, it can't be the chef. And then, yeah, so they kind of like are questioning whether it could have been the parlour maid who'd brought out the drinks in the first party, dressed up as a butler, but then Charles kind of dismisses it and is like, oh no, Miss Temple, our parlour maid, is too feminine and wouldn't have got away with tricking everyone by being a butler. And we also find out a bit as well about poison. So it's like so the pure alkali from the nicotine is an odourless liquid. And then it says something about solutions are used to spray roses, and one of the characters is kind of questioning, like, where have I heard about this before? And that got me questioning, because I was like, is this a link? Something to do with roses? But I can't remember where there has been any reference to roses. So I don't think that's a reference. I think that's just a little, what's it called, like a red herring put in. But then we then find out that Miss Wills, also known as Anthony, I forgot the last name, Also, Mr. Oliver Manders was also there, and Oliver Manders, he crashed his car at like the gatehouse, and Mr. Bartholomew was like, "Oh, come on in," kind of thing. And I thought it was a bit odd that he wasn't like an official guest to the party, and just happened to crash his car outside Sir Bartholomew's house. I was like, how does that, like, it's too circumstantial, that's a bit odd. So then my suspicions were on him, because maybe he just decided to go into the party and it's all down to him and he's done something, because why would he just turn up to the party? And then we've got chapter 3, goes into chapter 3, and we've got Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite is discussing and deciding on whodunit. And they straight away remove Oliver Manders because he was not an official guest, and their theory is that Sir Bartholomew figured out that it was one of the guests and was going to try and trick them. So he invited all of the guests from the previous party to this party at his own house for whatever reason. Like, I don't know, try and figure out who done it himself, or whether he had like a suspicion and just wanted them all there to see if anything was to happen. Maybe, I don't know. I don't really understand why you would knowingly invite a murderer into your house, but he did anyway. So Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite basically rule out Oliver Manders because they're like, oh no, he wasn't an official guest. And I'm like, well, does it not seem a bit odd that he just crashed into the gatehouse at Sir Bartholomew's estate? Like, does it not sound a bit odd? And straight away they suspect Miss Wills because they keep forgetting her. And that's like the reason why they're deciding it could possibly be her, because what is there about her that makes you forget? And I was like, that's a really bizarre, putting things together. That's a really bizarre way of putting it together. And I kind of don't agree with their opinions or I don't really understand why. Now, when they are asking, so they're questioning like the maids and like the chambermaids and those sort of people, and the cooks and housekeepers about the guests and like their reaction. And basically we learned that Angela Sutcliffe was distraught and crying, but then she said she wouldn't be able to sleep. So she only took some like paracetamol or something like that. But the maid says that she was fast asleep. So even though she had said she wouldn't be able to sleep, she was fast asleep in the morning, as if like she wasn't actually that concerned. And then I kind of thought maybe it was like a fake reaction, her crying and acting distraught. And then we've got Cynthia Dacres, and she was eager to get away. She just wanted to leave. She wanted to go home. She said that it's going to affect her business because she's obviously this dressmaker. And I'm like, well, why is she so eager to do a runner? You've got Captain Dacres, who just decided to study his nerves by drinking brandy. Then you've got Lady Mary and Miss Gore, who seemed to be quite distressed, quite distressed. Miss Willis, the housekeeper, claims that Miss Willis wasn't acting like a lady, as it were, because she was poking and prodding in places that was none of her business. So now I was a bit like, why was she so keen on finding out information and like poking at certain things to try and figure stuff out? I thought that was a bit odd, that she's kind of getting herself involved in stuff that's supposedly not her business, and she's like poking and prodding and trying to figure things out. Like, I thought that was a bit odd. Like, what is she searching for at Sir Bartholomew's house? And we also hear from the housemaid that Sir Bartholomew was actually not acting himself around John Ellis, who was the butler who disappeared. That was even making like jokes with him, and at one point Ellis had gone to him and given him her phone message, and Sir Bartholomew had asked to confirm the names were right. Like, so it was obviously questioning the message and was like, is that right? And we learned from the housemaid that it was a Mrs. D. Rushbridger, who I don't know who that is, obviously a new character. and had apparently arrived at the sanatorium, which is obviously what Sir Bartholomew has at the back of his house. And he just basically got told that she had arrived. So it's like, well, how is this? How's a new character? You know? So, yeah, that's made it to the point where now I'm back to square one with my list of suspects, because I thought I'd whittled it down to like 5 suspects. And then it turns out that actually Sir Bartholomew had actually invited every single person that was at the previous party to this party, apart from Oliver Mendez, Mr. Satterthwaite, and Sir Charles. So those are the only 3 that weren't invited. But Oliver Mendez ended up just turning up at the party unexpected because he crashed outside. I still think that's a very suspicious way to get into a party. It's too circumstantial. There's something about it. It's like he purposely crashed so he could get into the party. He found out about it and tried to invite himself in there. Something like that, you know? Something doesn't make sense about it. And then we have everyone else was at the party as well. And I just kind of find it something a bit odd about Mr. Satterthwaite. I know that he's like the narrator of this story, but he could still be hiding something. You know, he could still be the killer. But then obviously he wasn't at the second party. Not that he's letting on to anyway. Well, no, he wasn't at the second party, so obviously it couldn't be him. Again, it was the drinks. Basically, I'm still bamboozled. I thought I had whittled it. I thought I was doing really well, and I'd whittled it down to like 5 people, even before 100 pages. It got to 100 pages, and I think I was obviously wrong with that. So yeah, it is what it is. But I'm so tired now anyway. I can't give you really an update on who I think it is because, like I said, I'm back to square one. I don't know now. It just seems that everyone is back to being a suspect. So anyway, I'm really tired. Don't think I can concentrate on it tonight. So I think I was gonna get ready for bed, get into bed and carry on reading, but I'm kind of thinking I don't know whether I can. I shall see how I go. I'm gonna get ready for bed now. And I'm going to sit in bed instead of in the library. Usually I sit in the library on a Monday evening, but honestly, I'm so tired. So I think I'm just going to get into bed, chill with the cats, and decide whether I'm going to read or whether, I don't know, watch something. I don't know. I'll make that decision. But I wanted to give an update on the Agatha Christie book, even though it's not much of an update because I haven't got any further in trying to work out who done it. I thought I had, and then we're back to square one and everyone is a suspect again. But I am enjoying the book though, so that's a good sign. That's a plus. But yeah, I'm just gonna get ready for bed. I think I'm very tired. I'm gonna get back on it tomorrow. I'm working in the office tomorrow, but I should still have plenty of time. It's all gonna be a busy day. I plan on finishing this book by the end of the day on Wednesday, and I think I'll be posting my video on Thursday. So I've got plenty of time, so it doesn't matter if I'm not reading again tonight. But just wanted to give you an update. And yeah, a very tired me is getting into bed. That's the plan. I did some reading this morning before leaving for the office, and I read a further 2 chapters, and I kind of think I have an idea on who it is. We're not even halfway through, so I could be completely wrong. So we had, what did we have? Okay, so we had chapters 5 and chapter 6 of Act 2. So in chapter 5, we basically have Mr. Satterthwaite and Sir Charles at the house of Sir Bartholomew, and they're basically questioning people. They're looking at the butler's bedroom. I don't really understand why we're following in the point of view of Mr. Satterthwaite, and why him and Sir Charles are just so intent on finding out what's going on. And I don't really understand where the hell Poirot is. Like, where is he? He's just not around. So I don't really understand that. But anyway, they figure out that John Ellis, who was the butler who has disappeared, didn't get changed before leaving and was still in his butler's outfit. So at that point, I was kind of thinking, well, has he been killed off and stashed away somewhere, instead of him having done it and gone on the run? So I don't believe that he's done it anyway, which I was right about, because we'll come to that in a minute. So they then go to the sanatorium to speak to the matron, because if you remember, they had basically heard that Mr. Bartholomew had made a joke with the butler, John Ellis, and had asked him to basically repeat the name of the people from the phone message who had arrived at the sanatorium, and it was a Mrs. de Rushbridger, if you remember rightly. So yeah, they go to the sanatorium to question the matron, and there is definitely a Mrs. de Rushbridger that has arrived at the sanatorium. She's come from the West Indies. Her husband is still over there because there was like this question of whether it was like a private detective or something like that, and it was just like a code. But there is definitely a Mrs. de Rushbridger at the sanatorium, but I don't really understand what the connection is there. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that's just being chucked in there for the sake of chucking things in. Then they head over to the gatehouse, which is where Oliver Mendez has crashed. So now they're finally thinking, like I said earlier, oh, that's a bit odd actually, that he wasn't invited, but he suddenly just crashed. Now, here's my theory on that. So I don't think he did the killing. I think I've kind of ruled him out as a suspect, in the sense that, in my opinion, I think he was raced into the house because he was aware that someone was going to kill someone else. I think he knew what was going to happen, and he knows the killer. And I think he was racing into the house, and that's why he ended up crashing. That's why he was there, and he ended up being at the party. And I think it was purely because he was racing there to either stop or to confront someone. And then I was thinking, well, who is the person that he's been interacting with the most? And I've come up with Miss Gore again. She keeps cropping up in my suspect list. And he was obviously talking a lot with her. She was using him to make Sir Charles jealous. I'm thinking, you know what? It's linking back to Miss Gore, and it's linking back to the possibility that her mother, Lady Mary, was helping her. So maybe it's two killers, and it's Miss Gore and Lady Mary working together. We then see chapter 6, where they go back into the butler's bedroom, because there's an ink stain on the floor, like right next to the skirting board. And they'll be like, well, that's a bit of a strange place for an ink stain. And they work out that the butler has hidden some letters under the fireplace. So they pull them out. And this is what takes him off as a suspect, because he's writing a letter to the killer saying that he knows what's happened. He witnessed something that evening, and he wants £1,000. So he's basically going to be blackmailing the killer. So although he's not a killer, he is a blackmailer, and obviously not a nice person anyway, because he wasn't going to go to the police about it, even though he knows who done it. So either he's been paid off and has just done a runner because he's got the money. And this is the theory that Mr. Satterthwaite and Sir Charles have come to. Or he could still be killed off, because if we remember rightly, Miss Gore and Lady Mary are classed as poor. They don't have a lot of money, and there's a few characters who basically say they feel sorry for them for having no money. So maybe he still was killed off and they've hidden his body somewhere. But we've basically got to the point where obviously it's not the butler, it is somebody else, and Mr. Satterthwaite and Sir Charles has decided they're going to try and figure out what a connection is between Reverend Babington, Sir Bartholomew, who was a doctor previously, and one of the guests who has been at both parties. I don't know what the connection is going to be and why there is so much hate against the Reverend and the doctor, but there's something that I think is going to come out, which is about Miss Gore and Lady Mary. I'm still putting my bets on them two being together. And I know it's probably very obvious. And we're still in the first half of the book, so maybe it can't be them because I don't think Agatha Christie would do that. I'm trying to think. I don't know. But at the moment, I'm putting my hedging bets on it being Miss Gore and Lady Mary, and Oliver Mendez figured it out, or she'd let something slip to him and he was racing over to basically alert people. So I reckon he knows. I reckon they need to be questioning Oliver Mendez. So that's my theory so far. So I'm going to continue reading now. It's coming up to 10 o'clock. It's very quiet here, so I can get into reading whilst I've got my phone on, and see if I can make some more progress with this today. If I wasn't doing this, writing everything down, trying to figure things out, I would have finished this yesterday. So I don't know if I will finish this today, possibly, or it might go into tomorrow. So still not sure how long this vlog is going to actually take, but we shall see. And I'm keen to get straight back into this, so that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so it's only like an hour since my last update. I'm now kind of changing my mind on what I said previously. So you know how I said that Oliver Mendez had figured something out and was racing to the house to stop someone. I'm starting to think maybe he did have something to do with it. So we have chapter 7 of Act 2, so the last chapter in Act 2. And we then have Mr. Satterthwaite and Sir Charles speaking with Miss Gore. And she's the one who starts to suggest that maybe John Ellis, the butler, was actually killed and that there was a third murder and he's been left in one of the secret passageways. Now, I don't know whether this is just like a little clever thing that she is doing to kind of make herself seem like she's getting involved in the investigation, so she surely can't be the murderer. I don't know. I don't know whether it's just a clever little idea on her part, but it could still mean that her mother was somehow involved, possibly. Maybe just her mother was doing it. I don't know. And there's something about Oliver Mendez. It's Manders, I've realised. Yeah. We start to learn as well in this chapter that possibly at the party, Reverend Babington recognised someone and figured out something. So he was killed to basically silence him. Okay, so that's a good reason for him to be killed. Obviously not a good reason, you know what I mean. Then we go into Act 3, Chapter 1. So because they've had this revelation that maybe he recognised someone, we have Sir Charles and Miss Gore. They go to Mrs. Babington's house to speak with her. We learned that the nicotine solution is what she uses to spray on the roses, so she has access to what killed both men. But I kind of feel like, I know that poisoning is a woman's method of killing. I get that, so there's a good chance that it is a woman. I just don't see her being the killer. She had nothing to gain, and she even says that Reverend Babington had no money. It wasn't like she could kill him off and then be absolutely rich. And it seems like she was genuinely in love with him. And she basically describes the fact that they do everything together. So anyone that she hadn't met, then he wouldn't have met either, kind of thing. So when they ask her who she actually has met, there is Miss Gore and Lady Mary, and there is Oliver Manders, who they've met previously, and she does say that she did see, and they have, both of them had seen Angela Sutcliffe in a play but hadn't met her in person. So they kind of got this idea that he recognises something or someone. We then go into chapter 2, and we have Mr. Satterthwaite is sat with Lady Mary and has basically questioned her on certain things. She basically says how she feels sorry for Oliver Manders. So we learn about his past. So his mum and dad were never married, and just after the birth, his mother passed away, so he ended up having to live between his uncles and his grandmothers. So Lady Mary always says that she always felt sorry for Oliver Manders. And we also learn a bit about Lady Mary. So she was married to someone who was classed as the bad man and was basically warned about marrying him. He had a bit of a bad man attitude, and she still continued to marry him. And she even says that she was kind of relieved when he died of pneumonia, although she did love him up until his death and did care for him, which I kind of thought, well, that's a bit harsh, but okay. And we also find out this revelation as well, that Oliver Manders had at one point been really rude to Reverend Babington because of the whole Christianity, basically looking down its nose at people whose parents weren't married. He had basically gone off on one at Reverend Babington and had like an argument and been quite rude to him. And Lady Mary is basically telling Mr. Satterthwaite all about this interaction that had happened a couple of years prior. And she basically sits there and says that she thinks there's something cold about Oliver Manders. And she then also claims that she had been told by Sir Bartholomew that he was going to announce something at his party. So obviously he was killed before an announcement. So I'm still, even though she's saying all this stuff about Oliver Manders, and there is like a highly obvious reason for it being Oliver Manders, there's a part of me that's making me think that she's saying this stuff about him to put suspicion onto him, or basically give this bad character reference about him. And maybe that's like a little cheeky way to get the suspicion off her. I'm still kind of gearing towards it being Lady Mary. So first I thought it was Lady Mary and her daughter Miss Gore working together. Maybe it's not Miss Gore, because she's the one who's coming out with this information about what she thinks has actually happened to the butler, John Ellis, and so it could be just a little way to, you know, make her look like she's helping the investigation. I don't know. I'm still thinking Lady Mary. There are now more stuff about Oliver Manders that kind of makes him seem like the killer, but I still think that's possibly Lady Mary just saying that sort of stuff to get the suspicions off herself. I'm still going with Lady Mary at the moment, even though Mrs. Babington had access to the thing that killed both men. There's just something that's like, she genuinely loved her husband. I can't pinpoint it on her. But then, I mean, she did have access to it. No, I'm going to stick with Lady Mary. That's what I'm going to do for now. So let's continue on. I'll do another update in like 3 chapters time and see where we're at that point. So in chapter 3, finally, Poirot returns. I don't know where he's been. He's decided to rock up. Now that Mr. Satterthwaite, Sir Charles and Miss Gore are kind of working together to try and solve this, Poirot walks up and decides that he's going to get involved, finally. And basically when he walks in and says that he's going to join, Miss Gore is very annoyed about it. And Mr. Satterthwaite is basically saying from his point of view that he thinks it's because she wants her and Sir Charles to be the ones to solve this together. I kind of think that possibly it's a way for her to kind of steer the investigation if it's just Sir Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite, and maybe she's getting a bit worried that Poirot will just figure it out. So maybe there's like an ulterior motive for her to be a bit annoyed that Poirot is getting involved, because she has this like motive to try and persuade both Sir Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite in what they believe has actually happened. And then we go into chapter 4. We learn that Sir Bartholomew never drank cocktails, so it couldn't be a case that Reverend Babington was killed by accident and that it was meant for Sir Bartholomew, because he never drank cocktails. And it seems to be that it came from the cocktails. We have Poirot kind of suggesting, oh, maybe it was done prior to his entry into the house, so maybe the wife, but he kind of rules out Mrs. Babington. So, like I said, she's been ruled out because she wasn't at the second party. And then we go into chapter 5. So chapter 4 ends basically with Sir Charles and Miss Gore leaving. So we're left with just Mr. Satterthwaite and Poirot. And Poirot is basically saying that he's going to give like little clues so that Sir Charles can figure it out himself. He wants Sir Charles to work it all out. This is making me think that possibly Poirot is suspicious of Miss Gore, but wants Sir Charles to work it out himself. And he then starts talking to Mr. Satterthwaite about the fact that Mr. Satterthwaite went to Lady Mary to basically discuss about Oliver Manders, and that possibly it's because in his gut instinct he suspects Oliver Manders. And he's kind of obviously making Mr. Satterthwaite realise that's possibly why he went to speak with Lady Mary. And when Sir Charles comes back, they're basically discussing about the fact that this nicotine substance has quite a pungent smell, and you'd be able to notice if it had been put in a drink or some food. And Sir Charles is still very quick to turn around and be like, yes, but don't forget that Sir Bartholomew had the flu the following, like the previous spring, and his sense of smell and taste was very impaired, so that he may not have even noticed that it was in his drink or food. So that's interesting. So he wouldn't have noticed it anyway. But there's some like ideas thrown about. I'm back to thinking it's Miss Gore as well as Lady Mary. Like, yeah, there's just something about it that just seems a bit off. Why is she so annoyed that Poirot has decided to join? It can't just be because she loves Sir Charles so much that she just wants to be with him. I think there's like this motive to try and persuade what Sir Charles and Mr. Satterthwaite are thinking about the case by getting involved, and knowing that she can kind of give these little hints, but they'll just never suspect her. But obviously with Poirot turning up, there's a chance that he would suspect her, and she's not going to be able to persuade him give him other ideas, persuade him otherwise. So yeah, basically those 3 chapters basically seeing Poirot returning finally, and making me suspect Miss Gore again. So I'm going to stop now because I'm going to have some stuff to do for work. I'm going to have some lunch because it's 11:30 now. And then after lunch there's quite a bit to do, so I'll probably pick this back up about 4ish and read some more. So I'm on page 147. So I think I've got, I don't really have that much left. I think I've got about 80 pages left. So it's probably doable to finish this today. We shall see. I think I've got it sussed, but I could be completely wrong, and this could be just a red herring, and this could just be Agatha Christie making us think it's someone and then just throwing a curveball in, twisting it up, and then I'm like, oh damn, lost that one. I didn't guess correctly, but I don't know. There's something very odd about Miss Gore. So yeah, I'm back to thinking it's Miss Gore. Yeah. So let's go on with some bits and pieces. I will finish this a bit later. Well, not finish it, but continue with this a bit later in a few hours' time. Those are my updates this morning. Another 3 chapters in. So we've got chapter 6. We have Miss Gore. She kind of goes like undercover and heads into Mrs. Thackeray's business. Basically says to her that she's got a load of money and she wants to buy some dresses, but she's just basically there to get some information from Mrs. Thackeray's. And Mrs. Thackeray's even makes a comment that the deafs have basically made her business. You know, the people are coming in and buying dresses because she's playing the idea that she's the killer, and these bizarre women are coming in thinking she's this killer and want to buy dresses from her. So I just thought that was a bit odd. And then we get this like reveal from her, like of how kind of cold she seems about the deaths. And then when Miss Gore leaves, she waits outside until this new character, a Miss Dora Sims, comes out of the shop, and she works for Mrs. Thackeray's. And they basically go off for lunch so that Miss Gore can ask questions. We find out that no one that works there actually likes Mrs. Thackeray's, and also they kind of give the impression that she is financially not okay and is possibly borrowing money to keep the business going. And there's also rumours that she was having an affair with this young bloke who got sent off overseas by Sir Bartholomew. So there's a possibility that she could be wanting to get revenge against Sir Bartholomew, but it kind of just doesn't fit as to why Reverend Babington was killed first. So maybe if it's Mrs. Thackeray's, then maybe possibly Reverend Babington was killed by accident and it was meant to have been Sir Bartholomew. So then when she got sent to the next place, she was then able to fulfill her plan, possibly. Who knows? We're then going to chapter 7, and then Miss Gore goes and visits Captain Thackeray's, and he takes her out for some drinks, and he's like, oh, pretty woman, and he's a bit, you know, one of those types. And it kind of comes across as that he's suffering from some kind of mental health. And he kind of makes the assumption that Mrs. Thackeray's and Sir Bartholomew was giving him medication or persuading him to take medication. And I just thought that was also a bit odd. And he then makes a comment about Miss Wills, who is obviously the writer known as Anthony, or playwright known as Anthony. He makes a point of saying that she was in his room. So he went up the stairs and she came out of his room and headed for the servants' quarters. And he was like questioning it, and apparently his wife, Mrs. Thackeray's, has basically just said to him, nope, you were imagining it. And she's basically shut that thought down, telling him to just stop imagining things. So why is she so quick to be like, oh no, Miss Wills wasn't in our room? It seems a bit odd as well. We then see Miss Gore, she leaves from seeing Captain Thackeray's, and as she's walking down the street, she sees the newspaper are out for that day, and it's about the exhumation results. Is it called exhumation? Basically the results from Reverend Babington. And while she's there with the newspaper, Miss Milroy, is it Milroy or Milray, comes out, and this is Sir Charles's secretary. And she basically makes a note of saying that she knew Sir Babington from back along when he was a vicar in the previous place. And obviously previously we have seen that they were discussing about the fact that it could have been from his past when he was a vicar at this other place, and it looks like Miss Milway is the only person who knew him from back then. So I thought that was a bit odd. And then we've got chapter 8. This one is Mr. Satterthwaite. It's his conversation with, is it Angela Sutcliffe? And we find out, so she was the ex-actress, and we find out that she was previously seeing Sir Charles, and she's basically saying that possibly Miss Gore may have been jealous of her, something along those lines. I kind of don't see any motive for it being Angela Sutcliffe, to be completely honest with you. I can't really see it being her. There's like nothing there that's giving me those vibes. I'm keen to see why Miss Milway has kind of come back into the picture again, which I think is a bit odd. But I just kind of rule them out because I think Sir Charles would have definitely, because he wasn't at the second dinner. Everyone else would have recognised her because she did sit down to eat at the first dinner. But then it was a bit odd that she wanted to make sure she was sat down with them all. So maybe we have Miss Milway as a potential suspect. And I also think it's a bit odd that Miss Wills was in the room. Maybe she was finding something out. I don't know whether she's got motive to be the killer, but Mrs. Dacres kind of definitely has something going on and is involved somehow. So now, yeah, my suspects have changed again. We've got Mrs. Dacres and Miss Milroy, who's Sir Charles's secretary. Which kind of could be that she's trying to do it for Sir Charles on his behalf, possibly. I don't know. It's all a bit all over the place. I don't know who to suspect now, who to just write off as being, nope, can't be the killer. It's very interesting. I'm quite close to finishing. Haven't got long left, so I'm going to be finishing it. I'm pretty sure I'll be finishing this in the next hour, I reckon. We shall see. I'm going to keep going, but so far we've got, well, at the present moment, we've got Mrs. Dacres and Miss Milroy are on my suspect list. That might change within the next page. We shall see. I'm going to get on with reading it. Okay, so it's only like 2 chapters since my last update, but I think we're about to get to the reveal. Possibly. I mean, there's still quite a few pages left. I'm on page 178. There's about 220. It's about 40 pages left. So we've had chapter 9, where Charles visits Miss Willis, and we've learned that Miss Sutcliffe had been there previously, like a couple of days before, because she is actually putting on a play that Miss Wills has wrote. And then we find out about Miss Milway being away looking after her mother. We didn't learn, but Miss Wills did actually mention as well about a birthmark being on the butler's wrist, but to me it seems like she was lying, because then she changes what side it was, and then she's very flippant about it, and I don't know, something about it kind of tells me that she was lying. So, and then when Charles is walking away, he kind of like looks back, and she's got like this sinister smile on her face, and he is aware that she knows something that she is hiding. So I think there could be something there with Miss Wills. Obviously she was prodding around in the house as well, that we know of. And in chapter 10 we have Mr. Satterthwaite visiting Oliver Manders, and we learned the accident was Sir Bartholomew's idea, basically saying to him, oh, you can just turn up, fake an accident so you can come in, and I will tell you everything shortly. But then he also mentions that as he's talking to Miss Wills, he accidentally drops something out of his wallet. When she picks it up, it's a newspaper clipping about nicotine, and he just flippantly says, oh, I must have put it in there, but I don't remember doing so. I don't really have anything about nicotine, kind of thing. And I kind of believe him, you know. I actually kind of believe him. I think I'm taking Oliver Manders off the list, because I kind of believe that it was Sir Bartholomew telling him to arrive in some bizarre way. But there's something about Miss Wills. I feel like I need to put her on the suspect list. So who have we got? Mrs. Stackers, Miss Wills and Miss Milroy as possible suspects. We shall see. I feel like this next one is called Poirot Gives a Show Party, chapter 11 and act 3. So I kind of feel like he's going to be saying some reveals. So that's why I wanted to quickly get on here and give in my latest suspects. So let's carry on, shall we? And see what the reveal is. So, chapter 11 is the party. Everyone is invited, and at the party, Sir Charles basically takes a bit of a drink, drops down, seems to be dead, and we see Miss Score racing over and being like, "Oh my god," kind of thing. Turns out he's acting, and it's Poirot's way to try and suss out who would be the most surprised. So he's obviously watching. We only really see the reactions of 3 people. We see obviously Miss Score, who's terrified, running over to Charles because she's obviously in love with him. We've got Miss Sutcliffe, who apparently just cries and drops down on the sofa. And then we have Lady Mary, who is like, "Oh no, not another one," type of thing. I don't really know about the others' reactions. We then learn via Poirot that the glasses were swapped, and he's worked out how none of the evidence was found in the glasses. So once each of the 2 guys had dropped down dead, someone nearby had swapped the glasses quickly so that the ones that were tested were obviously free of any nicotine substance. Then we see that a letter arrives, and it's from Mrs. D. Rushbridger, who wants to see Poirot as she has information on Sir Bartholomew's death. And then we go into chapter 12. So Miss Score is intent on her and Sir Charles going to see Miss Milroy's mother. And is like, "Oh no, we don't need to go with them to go and see Mrs. Rushbridger." And I kind of feel a bit like it's a bit odd that she's so determined that Charles goes with her. I thought that was a bit odd. Why is she so keen to keep him apart from what's happening with Mrs. Rushbridger? Anyway, nothing gets learned from Miss Milroy's mother. But we do learn that Charles's real surname is Mugg, so he's got a stage name which is Cartwright. And we also learn that they end up getting engaged whilst down there because they decide they obviously both love each other, and obviously engagements happened very quickly back in those days. And when they arrive back, they basically say to Miss Milroy, "Oh, we're engaged," and she seems to be a bit off about it, and her reaction seems a bit odd. And then we go to chapter 13, and we find out that when Mr. Satterthwaite and Poirot arrive at the hospital, they get told that Mrs. Rushbridger has been killed by poison in chocolates. Chocolates were sent to her. Then we also find out that Miss Wills has disappeared, just like the butler. She's disappeared. Poirot is adamant that the butler is definitely dead. It's making me start to question, though, whether Mr. Satterthwaite has more to do with it. Because obviously we've just kind of ruled him out, but we're seeing everything from his point of view. So I don't know whether it's like a little play on the whole idea of it, like the narrator side of things that Agatha Christie is doing. But then it could also still be Miss Gore, because that might be why she was so adamant to not be near there, so that she couldn't get the what's the word, the blame for the chocolates with Mrs. Rushbridger. So she's obviously being killed to keep her quiet. But Miss Gore was aware that Poirot had received this letter and was heading there. So it has to be one of the people who knew that Poirot was going to see Mrs. Rushbridger. So my suspect is now going back to Miss Gore. But she's obviously got someone that's helping her, because that's how the chocolates arrived at Mrs. Rushbridger. So yeah, I think she might be my number 1 suspect, but there's always something about Mr. Satterthwaite which I never thought of before now. So yeah, I think the big reveal is literally just about to happen. We are now on page 202 as chapter 14, titled Miss Milroy. So I think we're going to learn a bit more about her. I have about 20 pages left, so we're going to find out. who it is. Okay, I finished. Did I guess correctly? No. No, I didn't. Agatha Christie is very clever. I kept trying to be like, oh, it's too obvious. Who is the person it's less likely seeming to be? I think I went through like everyone, apart from the person who did it. Like, how does Agatha Christie, how does she do this? How? I thought I was quite good at solving these sort of things, but obviously not. So, the murderer was Sir Charles. And I'm just like, what? And Poirot obviously works it out because of the interaction that Sir Charles had with so it was something about the birthmark, wasn't it? So one of them says about the birthmark. Miss Wills. Okay, so you know how I was kind of questioning whether it was Miss Wills or whether she was lying about this birthmark or what it was or something like that. So yeah, this birthmark kind of gives everything away to Poirot because it turns out that Sir Charles is acting. Oh, he was a suspect. Actually, no, I did suspect him earlier on because I was like, why is he seeming to be acting? Like, that seems a bit odd. So anyway, he was acting and was actually the butler, John Ellis. And the whole birthmark is what he did on purpose so that hopefully someone recognises it as a distinguishing mark. And Miss Wills obviously did. She obviously cottoned on to start snooping, and she was that's why she was prying and just poking around and trying to work something out. And she kind of suspected, after that interaction with Sir Charles, she kind of suspected him. And obviously when Poirot figured it out, after Charles sat there telling Poirot and Mr. Satterthwaite like his findings, he obviously called up Miss Wills and said, you need to get going and hide yourself away. So that's what she did. So she was hidden away. And yeah, so he killed people. I don't actually really know the full reason as to why. Oh yeah, so he's actually married. Oh, that was it, yeah. It's obviously just got out of my head. Yeah, he's actually married. So this whole engagement with Miss Gore, yeah, he's actually married to someone, and he obviously didn't want people to figure it out. So like, yeah. I'm so annoyed with myself that I didn't get this. So yeah, Sir Charles is the killer. That's really annoying. I mean, I did suspect him like very early on because of the whole acting thing. Obviously that did play a big part because he was acting. He was Tom Ellis. Tom Ellis? It's not Tom Ellis. What's his name? Just Ellis, isn't it? The butler. Maybe it is Tom. This wrap up isn't sounding so great, is it? But you know Ellis the butler. Okay, that is who he was acting as. So that butler was just, yeah. That's why he was able to disappear, because it was Sir Charles. So I do like how Poirot came about it, and when he was putting it all together and it was like, oh my god, yeah, I didn't see that. So I enjoyed that bit. Obviously very clever, using those little grey cells. But yeah, I obviously wasn't having Sir Charles the top of the list, off the suspect list, so I failed. Agatha Christie 1, little old me here, 0, I did not get it. Agatha Christie did it again. But yeah, that wraps up this reading vlog though. It's now 6 o'clock, so I'm heading off to do my food shopping and then heading home. But I'm done with this reading vlog. I'll be posting this tomorrow, which will be Wednesday. and I'm not doing another reading vlog this month. The next one will be in December, but I will be doing a come shopping with me and a book haul this weekend, and also obviously the wrap up is going to be on the 30th. So I do have a couple of more videos this month, but this is the last reading vlog that I'm doing. I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously that I will put in the description, there will be spoilers, because obviously I do tell you who the killer is, but that's the idea of an Agatha Christie reading vlog. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this vlog. There wasn't much going on in between. It was mainly me just coming on and speaking after every 3 chapters. So yeah, but it's been fun. I am annoyed that I didn't get it, but it is what it is. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video. Thank you.